Morning, everybody. I think
You go.
everybody from the committee's here, so I think we'll get started and people will trickle in. So I'll call the meeting to order. This is the Traffic Advisory Committee meeting for the town of Wakefield for February 19th, 2021. Just a reminder to everybody that the Zoom meeting is audio and video recorded and will be posted to the town's website and WCAT. Attendance, I have myself, Joe Anderson, Traffic Advisory Chair, Bill Renault from TPW, Dan Benjamin, Lois Benjamin, John Connors, Matt Cayley, Joe Conway. Do we have anybody else from the committee that I missed? All right, so I think everybody's present except for Mr. Mayo, who had a conflict with another meeting, so we will move on without him. I have meeting minutes from September 18th meeting, 2020. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. The meeting minutes have been approved for September 18th, 2020. Next item on the agenda is item 3. Dan, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I apologize for not standing. I threw my back out last night, so I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. I'm glad you had a flag too, because I need one for my office. I'll probably have to get one from you.
We'll get all the committees eventually.
I like it. I like it. All right, public engagement. So typically what we do for public engagement is if there's anything that somebody from the public has that isn't an agenda item, we try to keep it as orderly as we possibly can, knowing that some of our agenda items overlap. So if there's anybody from the public that has anything that's not on the agenda that they'd like to speak about, now would be your time. Well, Paul, why don't we get started with you? I think you had a couple of things for us, so we'll get started with the Town Councilor Paul Donaco, and if anybody else has anything after Mr. Donaco, then we can go back to them.
Thank you, Lieutenant. I'm going to keep this real quick. After talking with you, I think that we are going to probably have to rely on what is being told to us by the consultants as to the traffic potential of for the Salem Street area. Though it's always been a major concern of mine for the last 15 years, exit 42 area is problematic, to say the least, and it will continue to be problematic just based upon the type of development that is in the area and the ongoing issues with Linfield. So until we can somehow resolve those matters, I don't see us as on our own being able to address it. You brought up the issue. I brought up the issue regarding Montrose and Water Street, and you addressed those for future consideration. I appreciate that. The only other thing that from a councilor point of view right now is when the town issues parking bans, does traffic enforcement still continue downtown for the merchants? I know the merchants have not been issued their new parking passes yet, so they don't know what to do right now. And I've gotten a couple of calls after this last parking ban as to what they could do. Do they get notified at all? Do you know?
You're talking about like a snow removal ban, Paul?
Yeah,
or?
yeah.
Okay, all right. I know that we posted as a town, but you're talking about merchants actually getting notified of
Well,
it?
the businesses want to know how they're going to open up if they can't park anywhere. So I mean, and it's a legitimate issue. If we can't, if no one can park on Main Street, where the employees going to park at this point? Because now even the merchant parking spaces can't be parked in.
Yeah, I would think the merchant spaces over by Omelet headquarters, they could park at, but on-street parking would probably interrupt the snow removal. So it's a question that hasn't been raised before as far as where they can go while snow removals.
Joe, I can probably answer that.
Yeah.
In the past, Paul, if businesses are open, employees should follow the same rules that they've always followed, and that's parking in the merchant parking. As far as the business being open, customers, if it's feasible, customers can still park downtown. They just can't exceed the time limits. But if we have a major snowstorm and the roads need to be plowed, then common sense sets in. We're not going to per se ticket, but maybe we'll go into the business and say, hey, listen, you got to clear the cars out. We have to plow the streets. It's really dependent upon the snowstorm, the severity of the snowstorm, and how much the cars are inhibiting the plowing. We're not
Okay,
trying to we don't want to hurt the businesses. We want them to stay open.
Absolutely, and I agree, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Chief. But I know that the town has not started issuing the new merchant passes yet because they're doing it electronically now instead of giving them a placket. So it's all going into the handheld unit of the parking enforcement officer, from my understanding.
So as far as parking enforcement goes, they've always given a grace period for merchant and resident parking. And what they'll typically do, Paul, is if they see the same vehicle over and over again, whether it's a merchant or a resident, they'll leave a note or a warning that it's time to get your resident sticker if they don't have it. And this, I'm talking probably like a month or two into the new year. So they definitely know that those are a little behind sometimes with being issued.
Okay, so case in point, let's just deal with just today so that I can make a couple of phone calls after this meeting. If a merchant employees are parked in the existing merchant-only parking spaces scattered throughout the downtown, they won't be ticketed if they're in those spaces.
Unless there's a major snowstorm with ongoing snow removal. But the benefit to downtown is the DPW usually does snow removal in the downtown area overnight. So typically we do it at like 2, 3 in the morning with the DPW. They'll shut everything down and take in front end loaders and things like that. So I would say unless it's a major snowstorm, which in that case it might not be open enough in the first place, they would be good. Unless there's obvious ongoing snow removal, but they would see that, Paul. You know what I mean? That would be obvious because they bring in the loaders and everything else.
Paul, the other thing is with the merchants and the employees, the parking enforcement officers know that the new online system is running behind. And so if the employees and the merchants hang their permits from last year off of the rearview mirror, they're all set. Because like Joe said, there's a grace period.
Okay, so my comment back to them would be still utilize whatever you received last year. Put that in a visible spot within your car and park in a merchant spot and nothing should happen.
Correct. But within a reasonable time, they need to get the new permit.
Right, once we initiate that though, correct? Has that been initiated yet?
The system went up last week from what I understand.
Okay, so I can inform them as well as that too. So they have to contact town hall and obtain it through town hall that way, correct?
If they go on the town's website, I believe there's a link to the company that does the online permitting.
Very good, excellent, that's good. So in the major storms, do we tell the parking enforcement officer to not go crazy the day after a major storm downtown with tickets? Or is it still everything enforced?
Paul, these parking enforcement officers are very, I don't know, they have a heart for the businesses downtown. Let's put it that way. They're not
Okay.
hurting anybody.
No, that's fine. And I'm not saying that they are. I'm just asking questions.
No, and I'm giving you a very general answer of they're not hurting anybody.
Okay, that's good. Okay, that's fine.
Paul.
What?
Can I jump in for 1 second? So just to kind of piggyback on what the chief is saying, our staff over here is certainly aware that, you know, we're not in the business to try to interfere with the businesses opening. So if we can work around it, we won't even call any issues in related to, you know, your more commercial districts. Like, you know, Lieutenant Anderson said, the best window for us is somewhere between midnight and probably 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, if somebody happens to have their vehicle beached out there at that time, all bets are off. But if it's during the day, we certainly don't want to, force somebody to shut down. It's safer for us and easier for us to work overnight. So, we're aware, and typically that's not a call that would go out to parking enforcement. It's more the vehicles that are, parked on a lousy corner that's blind, and you're not going to see till you come around it and you can't stop. So.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you, Chief.
No problem. Good seeing you, Paul.
Yeah.
Anybody from the public have anything else that isn't an agenda item? Anybody that came on late that would like to discuss something that does not appear on the agenda? I have a public participation letter from Mark and Susan Mitchell at 14 Crescent Hill. I think they're going to be joining us, so I will save that for agenda item 6C for the Crescent Street proposed development. So we'll move on if there's nothing from the public to item number 5, parking restrictions. So I received a request from the new business owners of Creations Coffee, formerly Creations Cafe on Main Street, and they request an additional 15-minute spaces in the downtown area to help customers that are picking up online or to-go orders. Is there anybody from Creations Coffee on this?
Yeah, hi. I thought that this is John Spees, by the way, one of the owners of Creations. I actually thought that Tanner or Liv were going to join as well, but they're busy, hopefully serving some coffee this morning. Yeah, our request is just like, look, we're trying to find ways to increase our business so that we can be successful and continue to serve the community. And one of the ways that we're trying to do that is with expansion of our online ordering system, and anything that we can do to make it more convenient for people to order online and pick up in the sort of pandemic world, and whenever we get to the post-pandemic world, would be very helpful for us. So that's why we made the request.
Okay. Anybody else from the public like to speak about proposed 15-minute spaces in the downtown area before I go forward with that? All right, so Jonathan, I spoke to Olivia briefly when she brought this up, and I don't think it's a bad idea. We currently have, I'm going to bring up my parking map here. Bear with me. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. All right. So if everybody can see that, we currently have 5 15-minute spots in the immediate downtown area. There's one by the post office. There's another one more toward the library on the corner of Avon. There's one on the corner of Princess Street. Another one on the corner of Lincoln Street near your business. There's another one by the bread shop at the corner of Richardson Ave and Farmland. So we have 5. I think we could benefit from maybe one additional spot. The problem is we like to keep them around the corners for parking enforcement. It makes it easier for people getting in and out, obviously, too. But parking enforcement, what they typically do is they'll drive or walk the square, and they'll keep an eye on a number of things. Obviously, fire hydrants, handicap spaces are 2 of their priorities. And then the next priority would be 15-minute spaces. Those have to turn over quick in order to be effective and actually work. So I would want to keep it on a corner. Unfortunately, your corner there has a handicap spot, so that wouldn't necessarily be an option, but I wouldn't be opposed to having one either on the corner of Albion Street or on the other side of the crosswalk by, I think it's Public Kitchen, kind of Cravings and Public Kitchen right there. That would give us 6 downtown spaces, and you would have in the immediate vicinity of your business, one on the corner of Princess, one a little further down on Lincoln Street, but not a bad walk there, and then one more over by Farmland. They'd have to cross over. So that would be my idea if we were to propose one. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here for a sec. Do we have anybody else? Paul, I think you raised your hand.
Thank you. if, based upon your recommendation right now, I would ask that you do not put it on the right side of the sidewalk, but put it closer to Albion Street. I don't think you'd want to see constant backing into the crosswalk on a regular basis
Right.
to impede anyone trying to get across the street and not being seen on a blind side. So I think Albion Street, getting closer to Albion Street might be better suited for a 15-minute spot, if that's a location that you choose. My 2 cents.
No, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Anybody from the committee have any ideas or like to propose anything? Bill, what are your thoughts? I know, with the future of the downtown and all that, I know you're pretty tuned into what that might look like, on a larger scale. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not against it for sure. I mean, one other option would be, and we could talk to Dan and Lois about maybe relocating that handicap spot too. I mean, we have one within that block that's right there. So, I mean, maybe we look to relocate that so that the 15-minute spot is in front of the business that's requesting it. I mean, we have a good chunk of handicap spaces downtown already at this point, and there is one in the same block. Maybe we look to potentially relocate that. If you want to maybe bring that map back up.
Maybe you could use that handicap spot and make it into a van accessible one that I think we've been looking for downtown.
Well, on-street parking, there's really typically not van accessibility spots. That's not something that's done for on-street parking, especially considering we're going to be going with a parallel space configuration for the downtown project anyway. I don't know if that would be something that that necessarily I'd be supportive of. I mean, because the way I'm seeing is if we would have potentially moved that handicap spot to the intersection of Center Street, although we kind of have one there already on Center Street, or maybe even further down by, maybe even further down to almost towards Yale. And then
I'm just not sure I want to move anything as far as handicap spaces. I think that those might be spaces that people are familiar with and know where they are, and if they don't know they move, they might think that they were eliminated.
Joe, can I throw my 2 cents in here?
Sure. Chief.
That handicap space at corner Princess, that sees a lot of parking. There's always a vehicle there, so I don't think we should move that.
okay, good feedback.
If we were going to add one more 15-minute spot, would it make sense to do it on Princess Street, the first spot in on the right after that little no parking area?
Yeah,
Because when you look at the businesses in that area, you have Creations.
Yep.
I know that Honeydew is closed right now, but I assume that there'll be probably another coffee shop going in there. And those are 2 quick turnaround businesses.
Sure.
So it would make sense to put the 15-minute spot on that side of Main Street rather than having people use the crosswalk. And I think that Princess Street spot might be a good place to put it.
I like that idea.
Sure, I think that's a good approach.
Yep. I like that. Dan, to your point, if we could gain a van accessible spot, that would have been great. I like that thought, but
I know the Commission on Disabilities did have one woman that was complaining about van accessible spaces.
Sure. No, I know that's always a challenge.
Yeah, but again, on-street parking typically doesn't have van accessible spaces. I mean,
Right.
we do that in parking lots, and that's where the requirement is. I mean, there's no requirement to have a van accessible spot for on-street parking. So, and especially considering we're going to be moving to a parallel configuration, I wouldn't want to start opening up that can of worms, I don't think.
All right, is there any other discussion on this spot? I think I might make a motion. I like the chief's idea for Princess Street. That corner spot does see quite a bit of use, and it turns over pretty frequently, but there's nothing to guarantee it to turn over as frequently as it does. So maybe if we can ensure that with a 15-minute parking space, it'd be, like the chief said, near quite a few businesses that could benefit from it. And it'd be easy enough for parking enforcement to keep an eye on that. That's the thing too, is if it's in a place where parking enforcement can't easily see if it's being turned over, then it's kind of pointless. So I think it's a good recommendation, but I'll entertain any other comments on it.
Lieutenant Anderson,
Yes,
is it possible, what is there, 6 in the downtown area?
it's 5 right now. We'd be adding a 6th.
Is it possible to make those a different color or stand out from the other parking signs? Or is that a DOT thing?
DOT thing.
Yeah, I think the signs are kind of regulated by.
To prevent somebody from going into Brothers, eating, being in there an hour and a half, and you just don't realize the sign is 15 minutes.
They will when they get out, Dan.
Yeah.
When they get out.
That-
They are a little bit different than the 2-hour signs. I forget exactly if it's a color difference or obviously the wording's different, but I think they are a little bit different in configuration. They stand out because the 2-hour parking space sign is, you can definitely tell the difference just by looking at it. But because it includes, Monday through Saturday and the hours and all that on it, whereas a 15-minute space is just 15-minute parking only. So, but
It's like having a wet paint sign. Nobody looks at it.
Yep, that's a good point.
Lieutenant, if you could do it without having a 4-month debate on it, you could always paint the pole green too.
If the DPW paint the pole green, all right.
It would take 4 months though to make that decision. What color green you're gonna use?
That's true. This is true. There's a wide variety of shades of green, so I don't think we're going to paint the pole green. We'll take up too much time. All right. Any other comments on it? I'd like to make a motion that we install a 15-minute space at the corner of Princess Street and Main Street.
So moved.
So moved by Bill Renault. We'll do a roll call vote on this since it's regulatory. Dan Benjamin,
Yes.
Lois Benjamin,
Yes.
John Connors,
Yes.
Matt Keeley,
Yes.
Joe Conway.
Yes.
Did I miss anybody? All right. That motion passes for a 15-minute spot in the corner of Princess and Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. We're going to go on to item 6. First is 6A, 500 Main Street. That's a proposed bank there. And I think we have attorney Brian McGrail with us.
I am here.
Hi, Brian. How you doing?
Hi, Lieutenant. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. Members of the advisory committee, good morning. For the record, Attorney Brian McGrail representing MBAR LLC, the owner of the property at 500 Main Street in Wakefield. With me this morning is Bob Santinelli, who is the principal and owner of the property. Also Scott Thornton, who is a traffic consultant. I believe Scott's in here somewhere. Oh, hi, Scott. And Paul Pinocchio, who is our surveyor and dealing with us on the site plan. I guess if I can share the screen, would that be possible?
Sure. Yep.
Just to kind of give the board or the committee just an idea of what we're talking about here. While you're doing that, I can kind of parlay into that. So the property at 500 Main Street, I'm sure you're all pretty much aware of the situation there. It's a former location of Napa Auto Parts. There's also kind of mixed use that has gone on over the years. It was auto sales with a trailer, auto repair in the back of the lot. Kind of a blighted spot. It's been really underutilized for a number of years. And Bob Santinelli, who I mentioned is the owner of the property through the LLC MBAR, acquired the property. Bob owns a number of properties in Wakefield, downtown area. He owns the Dollar Tree strip where the insurance company is, and the hair salon and the storage. He owns the property where Cafe Italia is. So, Bob owns another property on Main Street. So Bob is a good part of our business community. And, as you see, all his properties that he owns in downtown, he improves them and works with the board to do that. Bob saw this as kind of a blighted area and an opportunity to rehabilitate the property. So he acquired it. And it's a pretty big site. So what we've done since he's purchased it, Bob has divided the property into 2 separate lots. So both of them will have frontage on Main Street. And what we're proposing on the first lot is to construct pretty straightforward one-story bank only. It would be the future location of Santander Bank, which plans on vacating their building in downtown, in the middle of downtown, and moving to this part of downtown. So I can probably, let me see if I can give you a kind of just a visual. Hang on a second. This is just an idea. You know, we're currently before the zoning board now, and this is an idea of what the building will look at. As I mentioned, it's one story. It's a pretty small building. Paul will bring up the site plan and go over that with you as part of the traffic study. But I just kind of wanted to give you an idea dimensionally of what we're talking here. It's a 2,500 square foot footprint that we will be dealing with. And as Scott will go through, we're proposing a drive-through that would come off of Bennett Street. And the drive-through is not for full teller service, it's for ATM only. So there won't be a teller working the window. It's really just to give people an opportunity to drive up to use the automatic teller machine in the back of the building.
Brian,
Yes.
that's Bob.
Oh.
If you're referring to a site plan, we can see a PDF, but it's not open.
Oh yeah, I got it. Well, I'm just kind of, I'll open the site plan now. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm going to show you kind of the progress plan. Can you see that plan? I got to fix it, but can you guys see the plan?
Not yet.
No.
Okay, hang on. Sometimes you have to stop share it.
There
How
we
about now? Got it now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let me just keep rotating it. This is kind of a progress print. And so Scott will talk a little bit about the traffic, but just to orient you, and I said Bennett, I meant to say Richardson. I get confused. It's coming off of Richardson Street. So this is the site. The entire site of 500 Main Street was this at one time. Through the planning board, Bob has divided the lot into two. This is where the bank building will be, which you just saw a rendition of. We're at the Board of Appeals to get the shared parking that will take place on this lot. That's part of our application process through that. And this is how this is the back of the building where the ATM would be, with entrance only coming in off of Richardson, and then circulation through the site. And this would be two-way traffic. Parking requirements would be met. We're also, Bill Renault is on, and I don't know if Eric is on from his department. We're working in sync with Bill, and thank you, Bill, for all the time that you've put in on this, as you usually do. We're working kind of cohesively with the engineering department of the DPW to make sure that this works with the envision process that will be happening, and also that it works in sync with the bike path. Bill was kind enough to kind of work us through that and show us so that we're not going to have to tear things up and do things 3 times. So we're looking at that. We're also currently the sidewalks, the way this works, that the town sidewalks some way have ended up on our property. And what this plan will call for is to relocate the sidewalks back onto the right of way. And we're working with Bill and his department to make sure that all geometrically works for turning and vision and all the geometry that's required. And that will be great because it's going to open up more area for landscaping. So, I mean, I think that kind of gives you an idea of what we're proposing. There's another issue that we've dealt with back here that, just to kind of inform you with the extent that we're trying to work with the town. The town has a massive drain line that goes through the property in the back of the property, cuts through the middle school, goes all the way down to where Shaw's Supermarkets is. And we're actually working again with Bill Renault and his department. Thank you, Bill, to make sure that this building is designed in a fashion that it can work cohesively with that drain easement. If anything ever had to be done to the drain pipe in the back, that there'd be sufficient space and the building would be built solid enough that it wouldn't be impacted. So that's kind of affected a little bit of our layout here. So, I kind of wanted to just give you the layout of what's happening here, what it's all about. Eventually, this lot will be developed with another commercial type use. Bob isn't sure what's going to go in here. Bob is very particular on what he's going to do. I think the goal here, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, is to do not to do a spec type building, but to find a good tenant and do a build to suit once you find somebody that you think would be appropriate for that location.
Correct.
Yeah. So that kind of lays it out. With that said, if I may, Lieutenant, I think I probably want to hand it over to Scott. Scott,
Sure.
if you could kind of maybe take over, would you mind talking about what this committee is concerned about, which is actually traffic?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. So my name's Scott Thornton. I'm with Vanessa and Associates. We prepared a trip generation memo. Also looked at what we expect for queuing with the drive-through window or the ATM window. And as Brian did a very good job walking through the plan, I just want to point out that the two driveways, the driveway off of Richardson Street is proposed to be an entrance only. And then the driveway to Main Street would be full access. So there's 11 parking spaces that are proposed. It's about a 2,500 square foot bank. So that should be able to accommodate the parking demand. And with regard to the ATM window, you can see that there's space for 4 vehicles to queue up in there. We had done some preliminary or done some counts of transaction times and queuing that occurs at a range of bank facilities that have ATMs. We noticed that wherever the ATMs are located, they seem to have a shorter transaction time, so around 2 minutes. We use that for a queuing analysis, and what we found is that on average, for an ATM window, there's about 1 car that would be there at any one time, with a maximum queue of about 3 vehicles. And as you can see, that there's enough space to queue 4 vehicles there. Even just the overall trip generation that we would expect for the bank as a whole, we're looking at somewhere between 23 and 67 vehicle trips total, ins and outs. For the drive-through itself, we would expect a maximum of 14 cars to be entering. That's over the course of the hour for the Saturday midday time period, or probably 11:30 to or 11:45, just before they close. But then we would, that works out to be, say, 1 car every 3 to 4 minutes or so on average, which is not something that we would expect to overload this queue storage. And then, as I mentioned, we did the queue analysis anyway, and it all works out. So I think in general, we can post signage. We will post signage at the Richardson driveway and at the other end of the Richardson aisle on site to make sure people don't start going down the wrong way in site or internal to the site. And then we can post signage at the ATM aisle that indicates that that's the last car in queue, and not to, if there's a car in that last space, that 4th space, then then customers should pull inside and park in one of the parking spaces. I think that's really it for traffic. I'll be happy to take any questions if any exist.
Thank you for that, Scott. So I think my concern is less with the amount of vehicles in, because if all the spots are taken there, then I think people either go into the bank, park elsewhere, and just go in, or they'll they'll go later as opposed to queuing 4 or 5 cars deep into the ATM. But I think I'm more concerned with the just the number of turning movements on the exit. So now you have, the vehicles that are exiting either the bank or the ATM onto Main Street and potentially taking a left across the northbound side of Main Street, while you have vehicles from Richardson turning right onto Main Street. You have vehicles exiting the Civic Center or the soccer field by the Galvin that are potentially either turning left or right. A little further up, you have the main entrance to the Galvin Middle School. You have Bennett Street. So there's a lot of turning movements in a small area. And like I said, I'm less concerned with the queuing and more concerned with the vehicles exiting and kind of turning into each other. And just want to know if you had any thoughts on that. And my other concern would be, obviously, you had Bill's help with the Envision plan. So just Bill, kind of how that works or might either work well with or interfere with the future of that area.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good with the coordination with the Envision component in that project. My bigger concern now is really with the rail to trail, because we have a parking lot that's going to be behind the building for the rail trail. So, kind of how the driveways are going to work, considering the way I'm seeing this is we have essentially a double wide entrance driveway off of Richardson, but then we'd also have our parking lot for, the public parking spot behind it where Brian's cursor is now. So how all that's going to work, that's really where I'm concerned now. But, we've given them the plans, and they're going to be revising, this layout to kind of show us how all that's going to work. So that's kind of what's driving my concerns right now. I think also I a little bit of better understanding is the second car that you're showing, Brian, on the property line.
Right here.
Yeah, these. So is that considered to be a drive aisle coming in? Is that what that is?
That's correct, right, Paul?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I would say maybe looking at the site circulation and kind of how, what I don't want to have happen is this turns into essentially an exit driveway, because it's going to be, if you think about it, it's a little of a weird configuration, having two lanes coming in to the site, right? But then you have on the Main Street side, two-way traffic. So, how that circulation is going to work so that people understand where to go. It's a little unorthodox of a configuration.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And we have sort of wrestled with that space. It kind of looks like it might want to be some additional parking over there, but we also want to preserve it in case there's some other demand for it. But it is something that we're still working with.
Okay. Yeah, and so that'll be something I'll be peeking at as we get the updated plans and we keep looking at this. So.
And along those same lines, with regard to the drive-up queue, those vehicles are packed pretty tightly in there. I think more realistically, you're probably only going to get 3 in there. Just wondering if it would make sense for, I don't know, maybe some sort of striping at the end of the drive aisle there, just to keep that space a little bit more open, because if there is a 4th car queued there, it might be tough to actually get in that driveway. I don't know if you need to, put some awkward kind of striping in there, but I think just being able to get into that driveway off of Richardson could be tough if there is a 4th car there.
Have you given any thought of maybe having, so the island that's there having, because I'm assuming this is like an ATM and like a window thing, right? That's what this is for.
Yeah.
Is it possible to have, because in some places they have like those kind of tubes that go over so you can still pay, but let you drive in so that essentially, Richardson would only be like an exit. Right? You only have one lane, and that would probably solve most of the issues. And then you'd have additional queuing. All the issues with the parking and the traffic circulation would all be on your site and wouldn't impact any of the public roads. I don't know if that's something that is it Santander? Is that the bank that's going in?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You talking in this area, Bill?
Yeah. So if we made that a one-way out, basically, and you use that island as the ATM's in the island, and then they have those tube things that drop down to go up and over you. I've seen that done for banks, so that essentially it would be a one-way. You kind of flip the traffic pattern for the drive-through. So this way, all the queuing would be in your property, which you'd have additional queuing.
Yeah.
And nothing would spill out into the town rights of way as issues in all likelihood.
Just saying the drive-through will go this way?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
problem is, I think it's kind of critical for the banks to have their ATM on their building.
That's not necessarily true. I have seen them where they have like an island configuration and they can flip it.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, I'm not sure whether Bill's right that they could possibly do that with the, I know what he's talking about with the tube going up and over. The tube might require someone to be dedicated to that particular site.
Yep.
It was something the bank does not want to do because,
You're not gonna have a tube because it's gonna be an ATM machine.
It's an ATM, right?
well, okay, that clarifies things. It's just an ATM machine on that side, then the bank needs an outside contractor to care for it. If the ATM is on the bank building, the bank employees do it. If it goes to the outside the building, they need an outside contractor. And they're concerned about convenience and service to customers when they use the outside contractor.
Insecurity.
Yeah. And just having the, the funds that they need in there, whatever they need in those ATMs.
Right. I mean, maybe there's a potential with the way the buildings, I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with solutions that would kind of eliminate some of these concerns. That's all. Like Matt's saying, I mean, we have 3 cars that will queue here realistically, and then anybody else is in all likelihood is going to be queuing up on Richardson, right? I mean, it'll end up happening.
Well, if you take that ATM, which is at the northeast corner, and put it on the southeast corner, you still got a queue of 4 cars. If you back up more than that, then they start affecting the traffic, the parking spaces.
Right, but I guess the difference is that that's affecting the bank's operation, and that's the bank's issue, right? As opposed to what ends up happening is if it backs up into Richardson, then it affects the rail to trail. It affects getting in and out of the parking lot for that. It affects more town services. That's kind of where the concern's coming from. But
What are the chances of having 4 cars here? I mean, I use drive-up ATMs all the time. I've never had.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, you know, most of the time you pull up to an ATM, you know, you're it. That's typical. Maybe you have to wait for another car, maybe a third car if it's a busy area. But you know, I mean, we can look to see if maybe check some other banks in the area and do some observations to see what the average is coming in at. But you know, it doesn't seem like just based on the numbers that we're at, excuse me, that we're estimating for the trip generation.
Yeah,
just doesn't seem likely that we would have, you know, a 4-car queue and even a 3-car queue coming in at maximum. That's like, you know, 3 minutes out of the peak hour. So it's
right. So is this just an ATM or is it an ATM in a window?
It's just an ATM.
Oh, okay. All right. I was thinking it was a window too. So if it's not doing the banking, I wouldn't expect the queues to be as bad then.
Yeah. No, it's just an ATM machine.
So if we could get some information, just I think on, you know, what we would expect for an ATM queue, just to be comfortable that, you know, realistically, we wouldn't expect to see any more than 3 cars. I mean, I think
Phil Scott's done that, I think. Right, Scott?
Yeah, we did take a look at that. That's in that memo from last month.
Okay.
But again, that's where we're getting the 1 car on average and 3 cars as a maximum.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have no real issues with the data. And personally, if I pulled up to the drive-up ATM and I was going to be 4th in line, I think I'd just go in the store. But I think my only concern was just you know, not somebody that would sit on Richardson to wait in the drive-through queue, but if that area is just sort of clogged in and somebody wants to get into the bank off of Richardson, they have no choice at that point but to wait on Richardson if that drive is clogged up.
Well,
Yeah,
but they could continue to go on to Main Street and then come in the Main Street driveway.
Right. I think that's what you would do.
Could. But if they had already turned onto Richardson, I'm saying.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Not a major concern, but with parents queuing up there for the Galvin school. I'm not sure if you did any observations about pickup times at the Galvin, but some cars do sit on there.
Yeah, I know I've seen some of that data from the past. Obviously, we can't get the observations now, but I did see some of that data, and I can go back and take another look at that, man.
Yeah, if you could, yeah, that's something I'd like to take a look at if you have it.
Yep.
So one other question I had was, Brian, you had mentioned the shared parking spaces. Is there going to be any internal cross connection between the two sites, and how would those spaces be shared? I just would like a little bit more information on what you're talking about with the shared parking.
Yeah, so basically, you can see these spaces, they have curb stops. So
Yep.
right now, we're not anticipating any connection to begin with this lot. So these spaces would be under our zoning bylaw. If lots are in common ownership, you can have parking on the adjacent lot. With approval of the Board of Appeals. It gives this lot more breathing room. We understand at some point it might impact the development that can happen here because we're taking some of the space, and Bob's aware of that. There's not going to be any internal connection at this point, Matt, that you will go on this lot. At some point when this gets developed, there's a possibility that we might come back and modify everything to allow a connection. But it's too early to say. But you're looking at this project where you be approved on its own with the encroaching parking spaces on this lot, with no drive-through connection to this lot at this point.
Pat, do you see any issues with the amount of turning movements in this area?
That was actually going to be my next question. I know it was mainly a trip generation memo, but I mean, there is a fair amount of activity in a busy area here. I was wondering, Scott, if you had any existing traffic volumes and had a sense of what the trip distribution is going to be. And part of the reason I ask is because with the Envision Wakefield plan, there's going to be a median on Main Street, which will essentially turn the Main Street driveway into a right-in, right-out. So let's just say hypothetically that a lot of the customers were coming from the south. Are they going to have an impact, further up Main Street when they want to reverse direction?
Yeah. So we sort of expected that there'd be some traffic coming from Richardson, but the majority would be coming from Main Street. And to the extent that there's, I know that we had potentially looked at opening that median, providing a space for traffic to exit out. I don't know how far we've gotten along with that. I'm not sure what the town's sort of perception on that would be, but if in terms of overall traffic volumes, it's not looking like a lot of volume in this area or for this site. We do have some traffic volumes for Richardson and Main Street, and we could do that analysis of the turning movements there and see how that shakes both with and without the median in place. But yeah, we haven't actually done that analysis at this point.
Bill, is the median that they're talking about going to come down this far?
I'm trying to look that up right now as we're talking. So,
because if it is, I think the town needs to relook at that, because I know the town wants this whole strip is, one of the things that the new economic development planner is looking at is how to entice development and redevelopment of this. And I got to tell you, if that strip comes all the way down to Hart's Hardware, there's going to be a problem with that, because not many people.
It's definitely not all the way down to Hart's.
No, it's I have a plan up right now. It's just north of Richardson, and it's just for that block, and then there's a break. Yeah, so there's a few breaks in the median.
Yeah, there are breaks in the median for sure.
Can you see it, Matt? How's it affect our driveway? Do you know?
It would be in front of the driveway. Yeah. So it would make that driveway a right in, right out.
Does it extend past the other portion of the site, Matt, the northern portion?
Um,
I didn't think it did.
let me see.
And I had seen an older plan. I'm not sure if it's been updated from the one that I've looked at.
Yeah, it does. It goes up to Armory. Oh, no, not to Armory, but to the next parking lot there.
Yeah.
Up to here?
Yep.
I mean, Bill, is that etched in stone or is that still in progress? Because would that be something the town might want to reconsider?
Well, I don't think anything's etched in stone because it's not being built and we're still not even at 25%.
Yeah, it's not even at 25% design yet.
But I can tell you that the town was very adamant about including it, including medians here. So that I can.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me that you're going to want to take people in the business, force them into the downtown when they want to go to Greenwood. You know, I mean, it might look good, but you got to be practical about it too, right? That, you know, these things.
Yeah, I'm definitely not disagreeing with you.
I wonder if there's an opportunity to, instead of a median there, just provide something like a left turn lane headed southbound that sort of shadows the one going into the school, right into Richardson, and then, you know, you have that opportunity to for people to come out of this side or the other side when it gets developed, as well as get into Richardson Street a little easier.
I think Bill's a little bit more involved with the Envision stuff than I am, but I think one of the main things for the project is to essentially be a road diet and take lanes away and make it a little bit narrower.
Mm.
But I don't think that putting a left turn lane along that stretch southbound would be well received.
Yes, that I would agree with.
Okay.
And just to get to Lieutenant Anderson's point earlier, he had a concern about people turning left out of there. If we were going to explore some, either less restrictive median or limit it or making a break in there, I think we would want to see some capacity analysis for that driveway.
Yeah, we can do that.
But Matt, you're saying that island is going to be directly in front of the curb cut that goes into the parking space. And that because of that, people coming out are not going to be able to take the left turn that the lieutenant is concerned about. I would also point out that there are 3 curb cuts on that main street now, and we are not putting in one with this project, and probably there'll be one between us and the awning company at the northern boundary of the property also.
Yep.
At some point. But I don't know, I would say, are we creating any more traffic, Scott, than there is already in front of this site? Is the bank addition doing any more traffic?
Well, I mean, there's, compared with an auto parts store, it's probably, it's probably an equivalent, maybe a little more, but not, it's not like a doubling. Of course, there's nothing there now, so it's harder to compare with existing conditions.
There were 3 businesses on the site previously.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can compare that condition as well with previous development, and see how this compares.
How long has it been vacant?
Well, Rilo's, the automotive, is out of there probably 2 years, and the other automotive before him 2 years before that. And Napa, I don't think has been there for 5 or 6 years. And previous to that, it was the old Herrick Buick auto dealership.
All right. I think we have John Connors next, and then we might have some public participation. So, John, did you have anything?
Good morning. I was just wondering if it had been considered, because whenever you have an entrance-exit situation on a busy street like that, you have a lot of confusion, turn signals, all that stuff. I was just wondering if it had been considered to make the entire parking lot one-way coming in from Richardson and exiting onto Main Street. You'd avoid that confusion and probably wouldn't have an issue then with people taking a left out of the parking lot if you keep the traffic flow one direction around the bank. Aesthetically, the bank might not like do not enter signs there at the parking lot, but other than that, I don't really see any drawback.
So we would, Are you saying to have the entrance from Richardson and a exit only to Main Street?
Correct.
Yeah, so I think the only, the issue with that is that, you know, we would expect that a lot of traffic would be coming in from Main Street, and we wouldn't necessarily want to have that traffic turn into Richardson Street and then come up to the driveway and then circulate around when, you know, there's a possibility of them sort of coming up with conflicting movements in a couple of different locations when they just be looking to turn right in off of Main Street. So that's why we wanted to have a two-way access point on Main Street.
Right. I was just thinking that exiting the bank, you could have a left turn lane and a right turn lane out of the bank, and it might improve the flow of traffic coming out also.
Yeah, you know, I don't know that we see the need for separate left and right turn lanes. You know, for the amount of time that cars are going to be there, it's probably not warranted.
Right.
So.
I think we have, nope, John, go ahead.
No, he answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Public participation from Bronwyn Delavolpe.
Good morning. This is Bronwyn Delavolpe at 8 Cyrus Street. Thank you for this presentation. I had a couple of questions, please. Is the entrance to the ATM only from Richardson?
Yes.
Okay, so people entering from Main Street cannot access the ATM from
Correct.
that angle?
Correct.
Okay. Is there enough turnaround space for people who mistakenly think they can access the ATM machine? Can they turn around and then go back out Main Street?
Yes, they could currently, right.
They could currently. Okay. All right. If for some reason the island on Main Street is put in, I have real concerns about people trying to exit and take a left onto Main Street, because if anyone's come down Richardson trying to take a left onto Main Street, you know, it can be a really long wait. This would mean that there is very possibly queuing of cars in the parking lot, and potentially, if traffic's really heavy, out back onto Richardson Street if the queue is that long. I mean, if traffic gets blocked up. I've waited many minutes on Richardson Street trying to take a left, and it's a tough turn. So I would like, while I'm listening to this presentation, I'm thinking of the Dunkin' Donuts down by the junction, and I would really like to avoid another situation like that, because that's been problematic from day one. It's a mess down there, and that's not what we need, and I'm sure not what envisions for this entrance into town. And also, is there a possibility that this would be approved prior to the final envision plan? And if so, how would that work? Because you don't know whether or not there'd be a median on Main Street.
That's
Yeah.
true. We don't know if there'll be a median on Main Street, so we're trying to consider if they put the median in. But if they put the median in, you're not going to be able to make a left turn and head towards Greenwood. As far as coming down Richardson and making a left turn towards Greenwood, the existence of the bank is not going to make any difference, because it is what it is now, and the bank being there is not going to change that left-hand turn. Additionally, people that come in looking for the drive-through from Main Street will probably just pull in a parking lot. One time they might come in and realize the drive-through is from the other side. But there are 2 ATMs in the front of the building that you can walk to. Just park and walk to the ATM. It's 3 ATMs altogether.
Can someone please highlight that with a pointer where those would be located?
Right in here, right, Bob?
I think-
Bob, right here, am I right?
Yeah, right in there.
Yeah.
One is to the right, that little jog on the right, Brian, and one is right here off the walkway in front of the handicap.
Right here.
Okay, so then is there a possibility of configuring and reconfiguring the Main Street driveway if there is a median on Main and if there isn't a median on Main? Could you make that, you'd have to make it one way, wouldn't you then? If there is a median on Main?
Somebody correct me about this median, but the median's in the middle of the street, so you cannot make a left-hand turn if there's a median and head towards Greenwood. You're going to be able to make a right-hand turn and head towards Water Street.
I understand that, but my question was, would the reconfiguration of the Main Street driveway be possible and or necessary if there is a median?
No, because we're going to want people to enter from Main Street. So if they're coming from Greenwood, that they can take a right into the parking lot or they can exit, whether there's a median or not. It's important to have an entrance because, what's going to happen here is, this building has a Main Street presence. So if people are coming from this area and they want to go to the bank, they're going to see the bank and they're not going to know that they have to go down Richardson Street to get in. They're going to drive by the bank and look to get in. And then if this is exit only, there's a problem because then they're going to be trapped by a median. What are they going to do to get back to the bank?
Well,
No, I agree with you, Brian. I think that they would have to, if there was a median there would still be two-way traffic. I mean,
Yeah, there would be two-way
is what it
traffic.
is. You'd create an awful lot of queuing on Richardson Street, and
Confusion.
it's just unfortunately for the bank, though, they may not be able to take a left out of that driveway exiting, but that's something we'd have to really revisit when the Envision plan gets a little bit further along, and it might be something that the bank has to deal with at that point, or we could maybe try to figure something out there. Bill would be better suited to see how that would work in, but I think it would still be two-way traffic. You'd have to try to alleviate some of that potential queuing, and like you said, Brian, it's a Main Street bank. It's on Main Street, so you'd have to have an entrance and an exit there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak? I think we have quite a bit of information, and I think that Scott will probably get us some more information about some of these concerns. But I think there's, like with everything with the Envision plan, there's a lot of question marks, and I think it's good to see the potential conflicts, but in the same, there's still quite a bit of work to do with the Envision plan, and that might have to be adjusted, either way. So
we are nearing a 25% design submittal, so just keep that in mind. That is a big metric for the project. So we have a public meeting scheduled, I think, in the next week or two, if I recall. So that'd be a good opportunity for other people to weigh in. So just keep that in mind.
And I think the timing of this project is good, Bill, because it
highlights the issues. And I mean, again, this has been something that's been going back and forth and been volleyed in different public meetings. So there is definitely a lot of support for the islands or the mountains. So just keep that in mind. And
Yep. So what I'd like to do, Mr. Chair, is we've been working with Bill, as I've mentioned, and then I think when I say we, I mean our engineers, and now traffic is involved with Scott. So I think what we'll do is in getting these answers, I'm going to ask that Scott and Paul Finocchio work with Bill and now Matt maybe directly, just to try to make sure that these answers get dealt with, or questions get dealt with properly.
sure. No, I think that's a good plan. That's a good plan. All right. Brian, do you have anything else on this particular agenda item before we move along?
I don't. Bob, do you have anything you want to add, or are you good? I always defer to my client, make sure he's.
Sure.
I think we covered it pretty well, Brian. Whatever affects us is going to affect with that island, it's going to affect everybody else all the way up to Water Street.
Yep.
So.
Agreed.
Prefer that I generate a memo with, requests for some additional information, or do you want us to just work directly with Scott?
I think a memo would be helpful.
yeah, I was going to say the same.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do a memo on that, Matt, and then we'll revisit some of those questions.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you.
With the Envision plan, are you going to be having a dedicated bike lane coming down Richardson and onto Main?
I'm sorry, one more time, Dan?
Will you, with the Envision project, will you be having a bicycle lane coming down Richardson onto Main, which would increase the traffic as far as bicycle pedestrian traffic?
Not down Richardson. It goes and crosses across Richardson, and then there's a crossing on Main Street in
Well,
front
it's
of.
going to be the parking lot coming out, which I guess they call it the rail head, will be coming out.
Exactly.
So you'd have an increased flow of bicycle traffic in that area also.
Oh, for sure, definitely. Yeah, yeah, that was one of my concerns. We wouldn't want to be queuing across that, obviously.
All right, moving on to item 6B, 404 Lowell Street, an 8-unit multifamily dwelling. Do we have anybody from that development?
Hi, I'm Lieutenant, members of the board. I'm Shane Losey, the architect on the project.
Hi, Shane.
Filling in for Mike McCarthy. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can you allow me to share my screen?
Sure, hold on. Whoops. Okay, awesome.
You guys see that?
Yep.
All right. So this project is currently at the ZBA. It's a proposal for 8 units. There are 6 2 bedrooms, 2 1 bedrooms. The parking requirement is 1.5 spaces per unit, I believe, and we're providing 16. It is on Lowell Street from right here. This is Vernon Street, so it's pretty close to the intersection of Lowell and Vernon. It was a former auto repair sales building, and that was torn down, and so now it's an empty lot. And again, here it is it's this lot right here, so it's kind of a commercial corner, and then we get into single family residential on the other side of the proposal. There's again some more auto uses here and here.
Shane, is it so it's strictly residential, just 8 units?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And you said 16 parking spaces would be allotted. I think the requirement for that size would be 12.
Correct. Yep.
Are there any handicap spaces, covered parking?
Yes. It's the one accessible space.
Okay.
And all the parking is on grade level. And all the residential uses or the resident apartments are upstairs on the 2nd and 3rd floor. So it's a 3-story building. You kind of see, so this is our site plan. Where there's an existing sidewalk that ends before it gets to our property, which we are extending through our property. Currently, the curb cut is basically the whole width of the lot. So we would obviously narrow the curb cut just to our garage entry. And then we have a driveway our lot slopes. So it's about a 12-foot setback from the sidewalk to the garage door.
Could you show us the driveways, the entrance and exit? We have something along.
So this is the ground floor plan. And so we have the driveway exiting out the garage door here. Is my cursor showing up on your screen? Oh, sorry. Now?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I have it open on 2 screens. So our driveway is here. Garage door.
The Lowell Street side. So that's
Let me go back to that other plan. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
So here's our curb cut. This is Lowell Street here. We're extending this sidewalk which currently doesn't exist. Here's our driveway, which is about 12 feet average about 12 feet setback from the sidewalk to the garage door. And our building actually has a drive-through to parking at the rear, so open air parking. 11 of the spaces are inside the garage. We have 5 exterior spaces at the rear of the property.
Is there any way to get to that open lot in the back from anywhere else, or is it just from the garage in the front of it?
Just from the garage. So we have garage doors on both sides. Okay. So they'll be on fobs. Every unit will get one garage space, and then the secondary spaces will split between interior and exterior.
Where would visitors park, and how would they get there?
It would still be through the garage, and they'd have to. We don't have any on-site visitor, so someone would have to let them into the space.
Do they have any ability to do that from the unit, or they'd have to meet them down there, or how's it work?
We can look at that and tying it into the garage doors into a call system.
And then exiting the garage, are there any pedestrian warning signals there? When
there isn't. We figured the 12 feet distance gave enough room and sight lines coming in and out. We're not right on top of the sidewalk when we come out, so
I think I would typically agree with you, but the problem is there's a school adjacent to development, and that might be something you want to look into, even though I would say normally it would probably be a enough of a setback, but hold on 1 second, let me just get everybody muted here.
Yeah, we can add that.
Yeah, I think that might be something that would be just a good upgrade there.
Okay.
I think so. My two concerns are lack of visitor parking, lack of accessible visitor parking. So even if you had a unit that, let's say, had two assigned spaces and they only used one, and they let a visitor park there, it's not as easily accessible. So I think that this, whereas it exceeds the parking bylaw, it doesn't really create any ease for certainly deliveries, but visitors primarily. And I'd like to know if there's anything that can be done about that.
I think we don't have on street here too, so
right.
Other than just the only thing we had was or we can add to it is a call down system so that people can access the garage doors through their communication entry systems. We could conceivably convert, this is landscaping area in the back, so we could conceivably convert this to a secondary accessible space for visitors. There's, other than that, that's kind of where that's all we have.
All right. Yeah, so those are two of my concerns. It's the garage exit being proximity to the school, and availability of accessible visitor parking. I'll open it up to members of the committee, see if anybody else has anything.
And a couple questions. So are the garage doors absolutely necessary? The reason I ask is just because with the whole visitor thing, if you have to wait for somebody to open it for you, you're gonna have a car sitting out on Lowell Street. And this is probably a crazy question because I haven't looked at the lot at all, but is it possible to put those uncovered spaces in front, essentially pushing the building back?
No.
No. Okay. And then my other question was on the colored plan. It looked like you had street trees.
Yes.
So I don't know how those fit on the sidewalk in terms of accessibility, but my concern would be more for sight distance and make sure that those don't obstruct sight distance coming out of the garage.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I think the piece about the deliveries is probably a bigger issue. I mean, I'm kind of in agreement with Matt that, I mean, if we could eliminate at least eliminate the garage door so that, you know, deliveries, the trucks could pull into the site. I mean, there just isn't a lot of room out there. I mean, you're on a 1-lane road.
And does that say only 15 feet for the driveway width?
It's 16 feet.
16?
Yeah, this one says 15, but we corrected it on the site plan to 16.
Seems like a lot of building for a tight site.
All right, anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'm assuming Lowell Street is no parking on both sides.
That's a good question.
Correct.
Yeah, there's no parking in that section of Wall Street. I think it might.
Is there no parking though? I don't know.
There's
I know
no parking anywhere on Lowell Street in that area.
Right.
Okay, Matt, maybe we'll do a memo with some of these concerns back to the Board of Appeals about you know, the parking visitor spaces, the garage door restriction, and some of these other issues, and see if there's anything else that maybe can be done about I don't know, either amending some of the layout, opening the garage door, you know, whatever they think might be feasible, and we can revisit it.
Yeah, I can coordinate with Bill on some of our questions.
Sure.
Great. That's good.
Okay, Shane, thank you. I appreciate
Right.
it.
Thank you very much.
I have to ask, any members of the public have anything for 404 Lowell Street? We covered quite a bit, so we'll revisit that. Attorney McGrill, I think you're back on for 6C. That's 44, 46, 48 Crescent Street, a proposed 56-unit apartment building.
Yes, thank you, Lieutenant. Is it a possibility that we could access the screen? Rick, can you?
Sure. Yep, sorry about that. 1 second.
Rick, I'm going to ask you to bring up the slide, and then I'll give a little presentation to the committee.
Yeah, it's Rick Salvo. If you could give me the permission, it'd be great.
Sure, hold on 1 second. All right, you should be good.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. There we go. Everyone can see that.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Rick. Great. Thank you, Lieutenant. For the record, Attorney Brian McGrail, representing Crescent Commons Development, LLC. This is an application for a comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B and 760 CMR 56, which are the regulations promulgated pursuant to 40B, to authorize the construction of Crescent Commons Apartments, which is a proposed 56-unit, it's one building rental apartment development located on properties at 44, 46, and 48 Crescent Street in Wakefield. As I mentioned, the application has been filed on behalf of Crescent Commons Development, LLC, which is a Massachusetts limited liability company. Steve Bocelli, who is the manager and owner, one of the owners, is with us tonight, as is his dad, Joe Bocelli, or today, this morning, I should say, as is Joe Bocelli, who is his dad. As is required under Mass General Laws 40B, Crescent Commons has stipulated and agreed on the limitations of its return of total investment for the project, which is required by the statute. They do have standing to apply. They're currently before the Board of Appeals on this matter. With us this morning is Rick Salvo, who you already saw, who is our site civil engineer. Both Bocellis, who I've already mentioned, are with us, as is Scott Thornton, who is the traffic consultant on this project also. On October 15th, 2020, the Mass Housing Finance Agency issued a project eligibility site approval letter for this project, which was submitted as part of the application. For those not familiar with Mass General Laws 40B, Chapter 40B, before one applies for a project pursuant to the comprehensive permit, they have to obtain site approval in the project eligibility letter through the state, the Mass Housing Finance Agency, and my client has done that. The state has been out, they've reviewed this project, they've approved the site is eligible. Until that happens, one is not allowed to apply to the Zoning Board of Appeals in a particular town for a comprehensive permit. So state site approval has to come first, which has occurred. I think you're all very well familiar with this site. As I've mentioned, it's situated on Crescent Street. It's located in the General Residence District, which allows two-family dwellings on 8,000 square foot lots with 80 feet of frontage. The property currently contains two-family and three-family dwellings, a mix. Total land area is approximately 25,113 square feet. The properties in the vicinity of this location really vary from residential to industrial. You have the Wakefield Tire pretty much across the street. There's municipal uses, the public safety building, auto repair, assisted living down the street. You have the Lincoln School, which is housing for the elderly, restaurants, retail service establishments. The property is also very easily accessible to the downtown shopping district and to public transportation. We're currently before the Zoning Board of Appeals on this. We've had one hearing. We did tell them that we would be appearing before the Traffic Advisory Committee meeting. As I've mentioned, the project will consist of one building. Rick will walk you through the details of the building and the site a little bit, and then Scott can make a presentation. Basically, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, in the regulations that I referenced, the project is exempt from all provisions of the Wakefield zoning bylaws, as well as local non-zoning bylaws. So basically, all those requirements are waived pursuant to state law. Those would also include any subdivision or any planning board regulations, any board of health regulations, and so forth. Basically, I think you're aware that in order to not be subject to Massachusetts General Laws Chapter 40B projects, or in order to be able to deny them, communities must have a minimum of 10% of their housing stock dedicated to low income moderate housing. Wakefield currently has a count of 7.35. So with the town of Wakefield being below the required 10% threshold, there exists a legal presumption that the regional need for housing outweighs local concerns. And for general purposes, a municipality must approve comprehensive permits or approve it with conditions. In order to deny comprehensive permit applications, a municipality must prove that the project impact would basically result in irremediable hazard or gravity that outweigh the regional need for housing. I think we're all aware there is a dire need for housing in this area, and especially affordable housing. The legislature just enacted a housing act, which makes projects of multifamily type more approvable. Zoning changes in relation to those have now been taken down from 2/3 requirements to 50%. So there is a mandate from the state to deal with this drastic need for affordable housing in our area. The 25% of these units, 25% of the 56 units would be affordable. We're also seeking to have a preference for Wakefield residents or town employees that would give those affordable units a preference in the lottery for Wakefield folks to be able to have a weighted chance to win the lottery. So as I've mentioned, we have appeared at the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Board of Appeals, quite honestly, raised concerns with density and the size of the project, the number of units, the size of the building at their last hearing. So pursuant to our discussions with them, we've made a commitment to try to make some adjustments and try to make the project fit in as best as possible. So our architectural team and Rick are working on that together. So, what you're going to see today, I think you can be assured there's going to be some modifications to this, probably as far as some unit count goes, and also as far as some design changes to the building. So I hope that kind of sets the tone for what this project is all about, where it is. And with that said, if I could, I'd like to have Rick make a pretty quick presentation just to orient you to the site. And then we can hand it over to Scott, if that's okay, Lieutenant.
Sure, that'd be great.
All right, good morning, Lieutenant, members of the commission. My name is Rick Salvo with Engineering Alliance, office at 194 Central Street over in Saugus. I think that Attorney McGrail did a pretty good job orientating the location of the site, and I think everyone's pretty aware of the site. So that said, as he said, the site's about 25,113 square feet. It's got 178 feet of frontage on Crescent Street. It's got about 87 feet of frontage on Crescent Hill, which I'm sure the commission's aware is a dead-end roadway. If we just take a quick look at the existing conditions, there's a pretty significant change in topography that occurs at this site. Up on the end of the property at Crescent Hill, it's about elevation 121. It drops to about elevation 112 at the intersection with Crescent. Drops down to about 104 at this end of Crescent. As you know, Crescent Street's a pretty steep hill. Grades back up to about 110. You see all the walls here, and then back up to 123. So that drastic change in topography allowed us to create a building layout that included 2 levels of parking. One level of parking is at basically the Crescent Hill, Crescent Street intersection elevation up at about elevation 114. And the other level of parking is below this particular rectangle here at elevation 104. So the way that you would access the site is folks would pull into this driveway on Crescent Street, go down under, and this is the configuration for the lower level, which would contain about 27 parking spaces. The other driveway is over off of Crescent Hill, which accesses the street level parking, which contains about 40 parking spaces. So this is a proposed 56 unit building with a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units with a total of 67 parking spaces. Again, 40 on this level, 27 on this level. To give you an idea, here's the unit mix. Whoops, excuse me. As of right now, there's 31 bedrooms, 19 2 bedrooms, and 7 3 bedrooms. Just kind of shoot through the architecturals. I just want to get to the rendering just to kind of give you an idea. So this is the street level parking here, which is accessed on the Crescent Hill side, and then you would go down and grade underneath that to access the lower level. That's essentially the way that the access and parking lays out. So I think I'll turn it over to Scott now to get into more of the traffic end of things.
Rick, could you just, before you go over the number, go back to the number of units and the breakdown there for us? So you have
31 bedrooms.
31 1 bedrooms.
No, 30 1 bedrooms.
Okay,
31
bedrooms. Yep, no problem.
19 2 bedrooms and 7 3 bedrooms for a total of 56.
Okay, thank you.
Scott, did you want any of these graphics, or were you going to use your own?
Yeah, actually, if you could just leave the site plan up, Rick, that would be fine. Yeah, that one's good. So, good morning again. My name is Scott Thornton. I'm with Vanessa and Associates. We prepared a traffic assessment for the project. And this was more of a conventional traffic study. We looked at traffic volumes, did perform some trip generation estimates, and also looked at analysis of operations, both with the site driveways and with the Crescent Street intersection and the Crescent Street intersection with Water Street. As was mentioned, 56 units, 72 parking spaces. It's about a 1.3 or 1.3 units per 1.3 parking spaces per unit ratio. The driveways out to Crescent Street and to Crescent Hill Street. We did traffic counts in January of 2021. We made adjustments to those volumes based on other data that was available, so that we accounted for passage of time, for seasonal conditions, and also for COVID effects. In terms of trip generation, 56 units is not a substantial traffic generator. On the morning peak hour, we're looking at about 19 trips split between the two driveways. In the evening peak hour, it's about 25 trips. In terms of effects on the traffic volumes, it's about a 0.6 to 0.8% increase in traffic if you're headed north on Crescent Street. If you're down if you're on Crescent Street, it's about a 2 to 3% increase. If you're down on Water Street, it's 0.6 to 0.8% because of the higher traffic volumes on Water Street. No change in level of service as a result of the project traffic volumes. We're looking at an increase of about one car every 2 to 3 minutes during the peak hours. So that's really the traffic study in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Scott, so when you say no change in level of service, are you talking about the intersections and which ones?
Yeah, so the intersection of Crescent Hill with Crescent Street and the intersection of Crescent Street with Water Street.
So Crescent Street, Crescent Hill, and then Crescent and Water.
Yeah.
And then I heard a couple of different numbers. So I heard 67 parking spaces available, and then I heard I think you threw out a 70-something number. What's the actual number of available spaces?
Yeah, actually, Rick, what's the current number? Because I may be working with some dated information.
67 spaces.
Okay, so 60.
40 on the upper level, 27 on the lower level.
Okay.
It still is about almost 1.3.
Okay. Yeah. All right, so I'll share a couple of my concerns, and we'll open up to the committee, and then we'll see if there's any. I know we have at least 2 folks from Crescent Hill who would like to speak about the development. I am very concerned also about the size and scope of this development from a traffic safety standpoint. I'm concerned with it because of the roadway width on Crescent Hill and how narrow it is and how difficult it is to navigate in its existing state. Also having a 2-way traffic entrance and exit driveway, parking garage type situation on Crescent Hill. I think that the width there of that road doesn't support, and I'd love to see some actual numbers and measurements, but I don't think it supports a safe point of entrance and egress for the residents of that street, which is a dead end residential road. So that's one of my concerns, is having that type of a set up there on a street like Crescent Hill. My other concerns are the number of parking spaces. So I think if my math is correct, it's well into the 80s, almost 90 parking spaces that would be needed for a development of this size. 67 are being proposed. So yeah, so 87 spaces what's required, 67 is what's proposed. I have to be honest, I wouldn't be comfortable even if there was 90 available spaces. Now, I get that it's a 40B development. I get that there's definitely a need for affordable housing everywhere, especially in Wakefield. So I'm definitely, I'm understanding of that. But even if there was enough parking spaces for the bylaw and then some more, the bottom line is a development this size is going to do something similar to what Priview did. And what Priview did was cause a lot of concerns for the residents in adjacent neighborhoods, to the point where we've had to come up with parking restrictions and changes even years later. You couple that with how close it is to our downtown area, as Attorney McGrill said, it's convenient because it's right on the other side of our downtown and public transportation, but I view that as a potential risk to the neighborhood there. There's really no available on-street parking there. There's a handful of spaces as you go from legal spaces from Crescent down toward Lincoln, and then there's really nothing available on the mouth of Crescent as you enter from Water Street. We have a difficult time as it is even parking at our own police station. So our parking spaces in front of the police station are public spaces, but during the daytime, officers that arrive for shift at 7:30 and 3:30 have a difficult time finding an available parking spot to park in front of the police station. So I think that it's natural for any development this size to have some overflow. Like we just talked about, a smaller development of 404 Lowell. There's no available space for deliveries, for visitors, for visiting nurses, really anything that you would have with a residential development of this size. So what I see this potentially doing is causing traffic issues in the area. I see it causing parking issues in the area, because what happens when there's no available on-street parking, people park illegally. And when they park illegally at the back of the police and fire station, it creates a hazard. So the handful of spots that we have on Crescent Street up to Lincoln, they're always taken because there's just really no available on-street parking. We just reduced on-street parking on the other side of Crescent due to the roadway width there. So I have a lot of concerns with the size of it and what it would do to the neighborhood. I think it would impact the police and fire response potentially, because let's face it, if there's no available parking, parking may be restricted on Crescent as it stands right now, but they're going to park illegally. Deliveries are going to park illegally, visitors are going to park illegally, and it's going to restrict potentially fire and police from getting around this area quickly and efficiently. And I think that would be the case even if it met the parking bylaw. I think it would just be bound to happen. With 56 units, you're going to have visitors and you're going to have deliveries and you're going to have quite a bit there. So those are some of my concerns. The roadway width of Crescent Hill and having a driveway on that side, and the potential for issues there with those residences there. The overflow parking, which would impact public safety building and neighboring streets there. And then I'd like to see a little bit more, or maybe get some of the understanding from Bill and Matt about what they saw with trip generation and how it impacts the intersection at Water Street, because there can be a real delay there as it is right now, especially responding to calls for service from the police and fire end, with a little bit of queuing and traffic back up there. And I know in the future with Envision, those traffic signals are going to be linked and be upgraded, but that hasn't happened yet. And we're just not there yet, and I'm not sure that that it would really help us, especially on a police standpoint. I'll close it with this. The public safety building is going to be undergoing renovation soon, and that's just going to limit our available space in front of the police station too. So this whole area is just getting more and more restricted with available on-street parking, and it's becoming more and more dense as time goes on. So a few of my concerns, turn it back over to Brian, and then we can discuss further as a committee.
I'm fine, Lieutenant. I think maybe we'd like to hear from Matt, as you mentioned, and maybe Bill, to keep getting your feedback.
Sure.
Sure. So I reviewed the traffic study. I don't have any issues with the conclusions in terms of trip generation or the capacity analysis and the impacts associated with the site generated traffic. I have two concerns, one being parking, which I'll come back to in a second, but you know, with 40B projects, one of the things you need to focus on is safety. And taking a look at the crash history, the intersection of Crescent and Water was not, you know, above the state average crash rate. Up the intersection of Crescent Street and Crescent Hill was, which is a little bit odd because it's such a low volume intersection. It's kind of interesting to see that there were, you know, 5 crashes there over 5 years. I'd be curious to see if there's a sight distance issue there. So I would want VAI to just go out and verify that there isn't something, you know, obstructing the sight lines on Crescent Hill, because it is kind of odd to see that many crashes for such a low volume intersection. And I'd also want to see a sight distance evaluation for the driveway on Crescent Street. At first glance, I don't see any issues, and the traffic study mentioned that any signage or landscaping will be, you know, placed outside the site triangle or will be, you know, low height. So I don't see any real issues there, but just want to see verification of that. Then in terms of parking, I mean, parking obviously is a big issue on any project in town. But I think in terms of this project in particular, it's, you know, any overflow parking, like Lieutenant Anderson said, is going to spill over either onto Crescent Hill or elsewhere on Crescent Street. And I just have some concerns about, you know, the safety that you know, safety implications of that. So I think the low number of parking spaces is definitely a concern for me.
And Matt, just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying too, we just talked earlier in the meeting, for those that weren't on earlier, about where do merchants park during a snowstorm, or where do merchants park in general. And we have some merchant space, one by near this development by the Omelet headquarters on Water Street, right near Crescent, and that's probably our largest merchant space that during non-COVID times fills up quite a bit, to the point where merchants get there a little bit later on and there's no parking available because it's 4 hour for merchant, and there's other developments in the area that that's where their overflow parking has gone. They know they can park there for at least 4 hours and get up in the morning and move their car later and not get a parking ticket. So now we're creating an issue for, you know, potentially for our merchants who really don't have much available parking as it is. We're telling our merchants, buy a permit, go to a merchant spot. We'll keep the downtown free for your clients and customers, and we'll create some turnover there. But if developments like this go in, potentially it could impact the ability to do what we want to do with our downtown, and that's to create turnover for available parking, to be able to have a space for our merchants to go to. And you know, right now it's already kind of tight as it is. We've tried to be as creative as we can about adding some kind of functional merchant spots that don't interfere with the downtown. But anytime you create parking restrictions, there's people there's ways around it, and there's people that take advantage of those parking restrictions. So I think people know that they could park in a 4 hour spot for an extended period of time and take up one of those spots without receiving a ticket, and then move their car to another spot. So it has a ripple effect, and parking in general has quite a bit of a ripple effect. You make one change and it potentially impacts not only other streets and other parking spaces, but like I was just talking about with the merchant spots, if they have no place to park, now they might have to park in front of their business, or, you know, or find a spot in the neighborhood, and it just doesn't achieve what I think the town is trying to achieve overall, and that's to create some equity and fairness in parking, so that way there's a turnover, there's available spaces for business owners and their customers, and just like we were trying to do with the 15-minute spot today, is, you know, try to help these businesses out and keep things flowing for them so they can survive, and that, especially in a time that's very difficult to be a business owner. You know, I think about Creations Coffee, and especially during COVID times, that's a lot of cups of coffee they have to sell to make their rent and keep the lights on. And if there's no parking spaces for their customers, they go out of business. So that's, you know, I have concerns about not only safety, but you know, the overall impact on the community and things that we're trying to achieve as a community. And parking, you know, it sounds like it wouldn't, but it's a big facilitator, in my opinion, of what helps our local economy.
Sorry if I missed it, but is the access to the parking gated?
I'm not sure that that's been determined yet.
Okay.
Is there a preference? Is there a preference either way?
I'm just thinking that, I mean, people could park illegally in the garage.
Right. Right. But at the same time, too, again, we run back into the same issue we were talking about on Lowell about, you know, deliveries and how all that's going to work. Because keep in mind, Crescent Street already has parking restrictions on one side of the road. So, I mean, the potential for spillover just doesn't exist here. I think that's, you know, a point that needs to be heard. We just don't have it. So, you know, it's really 1.3 spaces per unit. I mean, is that really viable in this location? That would be my big question. And where do the cars go if they're not there? I mean, that's a big question, and it impacts not only just the residents, you know, adjacent on Crescent Hill, but also, you know, downtown, as Joe was saying. So, I mean, that's the big piece on my end. You know, in some of the comments that I've provided already to the ZBA, there's some constructability questions I have on the Crescent Street driveway and how the grading actually works to get into the garage. Some questions on the retaining walls and if they're really constructible as shown. So, you know, I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here from the development team. So, you know, you have a list of comments from me already, and then, you know, I think we'll be looking to develop similar comment letter from the TAC as we were doing for some of the other projects we've discussed today. So,
and Bill, just kind of to your point, the spillover doesn't exist legally. That's I think my biggest concern.
Right,
you know what I mean? And having it be the rear of the public safety building where you know, a ladder truck or a police cruiser might be trying to go to a call. If there's an Amazon delivery truck or vehicles double parked or anything like that going on, it can definitely have an impact to response time. It can have an impact to our sightline visibility. I mean, even some of the legal spaces kind of make it tough when we exit from Princess Street onto Crescent responding to a call. And if a police cruiser gets hit because of the lack of sightline visibility responding to an emergency call that was created by somebody that was illegally parked, that cruiser's out, not responding to a call for service. And you know, now we've got fire engine ambulance going to that officer's crash, not going to the emergency. You know, the parking can definitely create some issues, and I think with some of the sight lines in this area and Crescent's a cut through. And that was part of my concern with eliminating spots by Brightview when we did that at a previous meeting. Was, you know, the roadway width is kind of narrow, but you know, is it functional to have on-street parking there? Because it's, you know, it's kind of a on-street parking can be a traffic calming, you know, strategy in some situations. But the more we looked at the measurements and how close vehicles were getting to each other, it seemed to outweigh the benefit of having some traffic calming there. But my point in saying that is, I was really looking at it from a traffic calming standpoint of having some on-street parking, because cars travel kind of fast, trying to avoid the downtown area, especially during peak hours. So you have poor sight lines that are, some of them are exacerbated by illegal parking, and you have a police and fire station where cars are responding in and out regularly. You had illegally parked vehicles in the mix and a cut through the street. There's definitely there's some potential for some issues there on a safety end.
Right. Right. I think if we look, around to other locations where cars could spill to, right? So the question would be, would they spill to Lincoln, or would they spill down to, the parking lot at the corner of Main and Water? Again, there's time restrictions on those. So, I mean, they're not viable options necessarily. And I just think that the team has to demonstrate where these vehicles are going to go.
Can I sneak in here?
Sure, Chief. I was actually just about to reach out to you because I have no experience driving a fire truck. So
I have some serious concerns about parking as well. Every point you've made, Lieutenant Anderson, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Crescent Street is basically a main access point for us to get to any area off of Water Street that we're responding to. As it is now with the present parking configuration, it does get tight. It's very narrow. I'm extremely concerned about our access to Crescent Hill, especially the ladder truck. The parking is people are gonna park whether you designate parking or not. And that's gonna restrict access to that area and impede our ability to respond via Crescent Street, frankly. So I'm very concerned about it.
thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Anybody else from the committee before I turn it over to public comment? Because I know we had some public comment. Dan and Lois. Lois, you have to unmute. There you go.
I'm sorry. My real question is, all these buildings that are being built, none of these buildings, or let me ask, are any of these buildings, do they have elevators? Do they have handicap? Are some of these units handicapped accessible? In other words, set up for handicapped people for the ADA law in town? Not in town, but in the state.
You want to know if the building itself is handicap accessible and if there's adequate handicap parking spaces and things like that.
They have to make it ADA. Everything, all these new buildings, I don't hear anything about the buildings inside, the elevators. Are there elevators? Not all buildings have elevators.
So I think a lot of that might be for the Board of Appeals for the actual building itself. But as far as handicap parking spaces and ramps for the sidewalk and things like that, can we?
Yeah, I can touch on that, Lieutenant.
Yep.
It's actually I appreciate the question. It's a really good question. It really has never been asked. And basically any new building, any multifamily building, they will have elevators. They will be handicap accessible. They're required to. In the question, I think what Lois was referring to, it's a good question. How about the units? So depending on the unit count, and I don't know what that is, but our architect who's not here today would be familiar with that either a certain number of the units actually have to be handicap compliant or they have to be handicap adaptable easily, meaning that, like, for example, the bathrooms wouldn't have to have handicap rails, etc., but the doorways in would have to already be readily available. So the units would be able to be adaptable for a handicapped person pretty inexpensively. It would be ready to kind of retrofit. So so that is a requirement. And it's a very good question. Thank you for the question.
But wouldn't the bathrooms also have to have these things that are in the showers or whatever.
Yeah, they have to be,
The
they would have to
railing?
be, they would have to be, and we can get, I'll get you an answer on that, Lois, through the architect, but my recollection is they have to be adaptable. So, you know, the big expense for a handicap unit is to kind of like make the doorways fit and make the pathways accessible. And then, you know, the bathroom retrofit on the railings is something that would, you know, would be, have to be able to be done. So I don't think the unit has to have all those amenities in it, but it has to be readily able to be retrofitted inexpensively. That's my take, but we can get you a little bit more detailed answer on that.
And Brian, on
But-
that, how many
What about-
handicap spaces are there?
What
Or we
about
could answer that.
Parking spaces.
There's three, two of
Sure,
them are van
sure.
accessible, and then this is a standard handicap space. And I think the short answer is this building would be, by code, would have to be 100% ADA compliant.
But you know what? All the other buildings that I hear about being built and stuff, none of them have I heard anything about handicap.
Well, the reason you haven't heard about it is because under state law, they have to be compliant. So that's a building code issue.
ADA, okay.
Yeah, that's a building code issue. So it's really not an issue before the boards, but it's an issue for the building inspector before he or she issues a building permit.
Traffic only.
All right. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak about this development? I think we did have some residents of Crescent Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, Mark Mitchell, 14 Crescent Hill. You know, I appreciate the committee's work here and the comments from Chief Sullivan and Lieutenant Anderson. You know, everything that I was going to say is pretty much already been said. This project, the size of it is just going to produce, as we all know, more traffic, more parking. The issues with parking are huge on this. No, I don't see on this plan any place for deliveries, visitors, and for the residents, for that matter, at the number of spaces that are there. And the overflow will go onto Crescent Hill, onto Crescent Street, illegal parking. I'm really concerned about the entrance on Crescent Hill, entrance to the parking garage. Definitely, I don't see that would work. The width of the street is just too narrow. The number of cars that would be going through that intersection from the building itself, it looks like it says there's 40 spots on that part. I've counted the cars of the residents that are here on Crescent Hill already. We have over 30 cars with the residents that are here already going in and out of there. There's a number of issues on the street. It's a dead end. Constantly, people are thinking it's a throughway, so mistakenly we'll drive down there, come right to the very end. It's not a cul-de-sac, not easy to turn around. You know, that happens and will increase with this development. And again, the safety, the fire department being able to get down the road is a big concern. So I guess in closing, it's, you know, I'm just echoing everything that I'm hearing, which is good because everybody agrees with what we're thinking. I can say I'm also speaking for the whole neighborhood. We have all gotten together and talked, and you know, everyone on this street has the same feelings.
Mr. Mitchell, thank you, and I appreciate you doing a little bit of homework for us too. So you say there's about 30 vehicles on Crescent Hill, roughly, from your estimates of existing business sale. And I think you bring up a good point too, that, I mean, I'm familiar with Crescent Hill, but not everybody may be. And so it's kind of obvious to me, but it's good that you bring it up. It's not a cul-de-sac. So it's for vehicles that are either looking for, let's say they go in, looking for a parking space. There isn't one. They exit, they take a right onto Crescent Hill from that driveway, looking for maybe an on-street parking option. There's no easy way to turn around there, especially if there's, like you said, potentially up to 30 vehicles on that street. So it's a very good point. It's not a cul-de-sac. It's not easy to turn around. It's a narrow dead-end street. It is what it is. So thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Is there anybody else from the neighborhood or the public that would like to speak about this proposed development? All right. So Brian, I think we'll.
Excuse me, I had my hand raised, Bronwyn Delavope.
Oh, it didn't come up, Bronwyn. I apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry.
After you.
Thank you. Again, I have to agree with pretty much things that have been said here. Was a rendering of the actual building brought up during this presentation? And if not, could we please bring that up?
There was, and it was going back to it right now.
Yes, that one. Yeah, I just wanted to, and I wanted to just to point out that the rendering shows a street directly adjacent to the end of the building, and that's not accurate because there are two buildings there. So there isn't a street. You see where the red car is?
That's the driveway.
That's the driveway?
Correct.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. That's all I wanted to see. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Anybody else from the public? Because for some reason I'm not seeing the hands being raised. So if there's anybody else. Anybody else from traffic advisory that would like to give any closing comments? So Brian, I think the Board of Appeals asked that there's a few developments that they would like some representation on from traffic advisory. So I think we probably will produce a memo outlining some of the concerns that we had today, and either Bill and I or Matt and I will, or even all three of us will probably go to the next meeting, and we will go from there.
Lieutenant Anderson,
Yes.
can I just make a statement? And I'm not a traffic engineer. Maybe this is a stupid comment to make, but with COVID-19 going on, how in the world can they make traffic studies and they can be accurate? I mean, what do they just take a traffic study, add 10%, 20% to it?
So there
Because
is,
totally-
and Bill and Matt have spoken about this with some other proposals in the past. There is a standard, Dan, that they add for factoring in, kind of pre and post COVID. So I know that the studies do include that, but you're right. It's still, they're following their standard, but it's still tough to get a really good representation of where things were and where things might be. And I think you could argue both sides that things will pick up again and it'll be extremely, congested in some areas, or in some areas it might not be. People might work from home for the foreseeable future, and people might not commute in anymore. But then again, you might see more traffic at non-peak hours in town. So you might see more people out for lunch in Wakefield where they were commuting into the city and they wouldn't be around in the first place to be out and about in town. So I think you bring up a good point. It's they're following what the standard is to add in factoring for COVID, but I don't think
it's the new normal. But what is the normal?
You're right, and it kind of depends on where we're at with COVID. And I think that like I said, I see more traffic around midday than I did before, because more people are in town where they were at work before. So I think traffic is just it's something that's constantly changing, and I think they do the best they can with what their standards are for factoring in COVID. But you're right, it's that is what they do. They have a certain percentage that they factor into their study. All right, anybody else on this agenda item before we move along?
If I could, Lieutenant.
Yes.
just kind of closing on our end. So, a lot of the comments that we heard from you today are very consistent with comments that we heard at the zoning board. I think, I think the committee is aware, and we had a discussion with the zoning board, these 40B projects are somewhat unique. They're not governed by zoning. So a lot of the conventional projects that have been permitted and built, the board requires and your committee requires they comply with parking requirements, because you can do that when it's a conventional project. When it's a 40B, it's a different animal, because as I mentioned, some of the, not some of, but all of the zoning is not applicable anymore. So when my client got the site approval letter from the state on this, I'm going to reference from the letter, they talked about density, and they said, I'll quote, "The developer intends to build a 56 units on approximately 25,113 square feet of land, all of which are buildable. The resulting density is 98 units per buildable acre, which is acceptable given the proposed housing type and project's location within an existing mixed-use and transit-oriented neighborhood." So that's kind of the guidelines that they kind of go by, that my client did. With that being said, we told the board, we believe it's always good to, my client does, to work with everybody to try to come up with what's a good project for everybody. So what the zoning board did, as I've mentioned, they clearly referenced to us some dissatisfaction points, which are very consistent with yours. And so what they did is they designated 2 board members to work with our team to try to make changes to make the project acceptable. So we're in the process of commencing with those 2 board members. And I do think the concerns that you raised would be helpful if you put it in a memo to them, because I think it might help give them guidance on concerns that you had, to make sure as we discuss modifications that some of those things are considered. Like, for example, I don't think that they're aware of the concerns on the Crescent Hill access point, so it might be good for them to hear that and to take that into consideration, because I think we are going to do a little bit of a redesign here based on some of the comments that we've gotten from them and from you. And I think the more information that they have in that regard would help push this in the correct direction.
Okay. No, I think that's
so thank you for that.
That's definitely something that we'll do, and we'll definitely represent some of those concerns at the next Board of Appeals meeting.
And I think it might be actually helpful. So we're not going back to the board. We're not scheduled to go back to the Board of Appeals because of this subcommittee or a designated couple of members back until, I think it's March 9th.
Okay.
So it's a ways off. So
we'll have something before then too.
Yeah, I mean, so because we're going to kind of be working with them through these designated members, it might be helpful if they got something in advance, so they kind of know your thoughts as we're working with them, so we don't kind of go down a direction with them. And I would certainly convey it to them in that process, but it might just be better and more helpful to them if they just got a quick memo.
No, that works. It definitely works.
And I don't think it's going to be shocking to them, because I think everything you pretty much stated is fairly consistent with what they stated themselves. But I think the Crescent Hill entrance exit might be something a little bit new.
Okay.
Rick Salvo, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, and like I said, the comments that we received today weren't a whole lot different from what we got at the ZBA. I think these comments will be helpful for the subcommittee in moving forward towards a revised design.
All right, thank you, Rick, and thank you, Attorney McGrill. So
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you for your time.
Matt, would you mind preparing a memo based on the concerns that we had at this meeting and forward it to me? I'll make sure that Attorney McGrill gets it along with the board.
Yep, I'm going to generate separate memos just to keep the different projects separate.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
Attorney McGrill, while I have you, we're not going forward on item 6D for the 6276 Foundry Street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Not ready to go forward on that.
All right, so that one's not ready today. We'll revisit that in the future, at a future meeting. we're going to move on to item 7, our traffic calming policy. This is something that Bill and I started working on. Bill, it seems like forever ago that we started working on it, but we just get too busy with, oddly enough, traffic calming issues to even implement the policy. So just as a little, by way of background, Bill presented the idea to me that we look over some other cities and towns, their model policies for traffic calming. Traffic calming is kind of a way that we can address speeding issues and traffic congestion issues and things like that throughout town. And the policy basically would help us to evaluate traffic issues in town, speeding issues in town, and see if there actually, number one, is in fact an issue as presented by residents. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And sometimes there is an issue, but what can we actually do about it? And what can the town afford to do about it? Where does it rank against other traffic issues in town? It might be an issue for that neighborhood, but it might be really low on the list of priority concerns where the town wants to spend its money to kind of get the most value, especially with dangerous intersections and things like that, where there's documented crash history and things of that nature. So this is more of a discussion for the committee to see where we're at with that policy. The policy, like I said, it would basically take a resident's concern, it would forward it to us. We would look into it. At that point, would follow a flow chart to traffic advisory, and if there was any potential for traffic calming measures to be employed, we would rank it based on a number of factors there. So does anybody from the committee have any questions or comments based on that draft that I provided? And then Bill and I will kind of discuss a few more points, and then hopefully by the next meeting, Bill, we can get that final draft over to town council and see if they'll vote on that. And I think it will be helpful, because what we've been trying to do is we've been trying to have basically our own policy of sorts by way of, something comes to me, I bring it up to Bill, we bring it up on a traffic advisory meeting, we send residents back to their neighborhood and ask them to kind of generate some community support, some neighborhood support for whether it's a parking restriction or a traffic calming measure, things like that. So this would have a documented process where it would streamline things not only for residents, but for us to make sure things don't get lost in the shuffle, and to move on from things that really aren't widespread concerns. Maybe one resident has, an issue or a complaint about something, but it's not an issue of concern for the entire neighborhood or for the town to address.
Yeah, I think that last part's a big one too, just to make sure that, any improvement that we're gonna look to do, that there is full neighborhood support. I think that's a big piece. The only other thing I would add, Joe, maybe, is if we would want to potentially, because we're kind of developing a process for applications to essentially come into the TAC now. Would it make sense to maybe add a section on, parking change requests too, to have it maybe a little bit more?
It's funny you mentioned that. So I sent the draft to everybody, which was pretty much unchanged from the last time we had sent it out. But just a couple of nights ago, I changed it to a parking restriction, traffic calming and parking restriction policy. So great minds think alike, or at least maybe I think like you. But
I don't think you want to do that.
No, I don't think so. But I think the parking piece is huge, because that's what we see a lot of, and some of the issues that we come up with is I want parking restrictions on one side of the street, but you really need the whole street to be on board with that. So I think that's the only thing that I'll change, is to basically follow a similar flow as the traffic calming policy. The only difference would be we're not really, for the most part, changing anything or really installing much more than signage for the most part. So I don't know that it would have as extensive of a flow, but it would still come in, and some of the same things would apply. That if we do go ahead and make this change, we're not just going to change it. A month from now, we're going to see the change through, and and reevaluate it some months down the road and things like that.
I think
So,
that's the piece. So I mean, because back in the day when we first started, I recall that there was a couple of issues. I think where we initiated some parking restriction, and then it came back and said, "Hey, we didn't really want it to go that way." So I might streamline some of that process a little bit.
Yep. And just to kind of just to put this out there too, there's nothing about this policy that restricts us as the TAC or the town from saying like, hey, this is an issue and it may not fit the exact criteria of a traffic calming policy or parking restriction policy, but this policy is more for, you have a resident complaint, we want to be able to hear it, not get lost in the shuffle, and see if it has any real legitimacy to it, and then make sure that we address it. But that's from more of a like a resident standpoint of concerns in the neighborhood. But if the town has an issue or a traffic advisory sees an issue, we can still address it. It doesn't mean that we're restricted. The policy is a guideline and it helps us streamline some of what we do. But I just wanted to get that out there, that it's not something that restricts us, and it has to follow this policy, and it has to be rigid to the standards there. It's more to address resident complaints and try to prioritize some of those issues. So anybody have anything on it? I know it's kind of a lot to digest. Bill and I are a little more familiar with it since we worked through some of the area policies. Concord was a good one. There was some other cities and towns, Brookline, that we might have taken some pieces from, but we wanted it to accurately reflect Wakefield, and that's the goal. So our hope is to have a traffic calming and parking restriction policy back to us on the next meeting, and then if everything looks good at that meeting and there's no real change to it, we'll propose it to town council. And I think that's all I have from what actually.
Just one question, Joe. I didn't read it word for word, but is there a way that people can submit this electronically?
Yeah, so that's I'll work with the town on that, because less paper the better on that end, and it's gonna be easier too. So we'll see if there's a way that it can be done, but ultimately a portion of it, and Bill's probably gonna say this is a petition part, so that has to be in writing.
Yeah, sure.
To some degree, but yeah, I think the initial stages, Bill, maybe we could get that done electronically.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a permitting software that we already use here, that we created through an online. It has like an online form that you can use and log in. So that and then it emails to different folks. So
or even just simpler than that, just say send forms here or email to to you or Joe. I'm just bringing that up because I'm thinking back to the gentleman who organized the Greenwood neighborhood information, and that was great what he did. Just to see all that stuff compiled, and it was easy to review. He had all the photos and then made his presentation. Seems like that should sort of be the standard. But
exactly, that's kind of that's the thought process. Yeah.
I had a chat from Andrew Simmons, who had to leave the meeting a little early, but he wanted to provide some feedback. Town staff might need to be better defined, which I can definitely do. Area of influence, maybe too broad, but Bill, I think that's something that has to really be defined by engineering to see what it depends on where, right? It depends on where the complaint is. So I think it's intentionally vague, just to have. You couldn't say that 5 houses in either direction, or it really depends on the actual complaint and where it is. But he brings up a good point there. 75% he thought was too high of a bar in Wakefield for any level of public engagement. What happens to ongoing projects? How do we track the status in a publicly available fashion? So looking for transparency on that end, which I think we do anyway with our meeting minutes and the Zoom calls and having them posted. But it wouldn't hurt to see if there's any way to actually track ongoing requests and projects. But that might be something that we can do with DPW. If you guys have any type of system where you track complaints and things like that, might be able to tie in with that. We don't require any of this level of community engagement for new developments, but perhaps should. So
I don't know if I would agree with that. I mean, there's
yeah, I think this is,
are notified, and I mean that does happen. So
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. But I think he makes some good points. So I'll look into that. As far as the bar being too high, it's actually a lot lower to answer his question. Than I actually amended that from some of the other policies that we saw, Bill, were like 90-95%. They wanted to make sure that like almost everybody in that neighborhood, besides maybe one holdout, agreed with it. So I made it a little bit more reasonable, but I think we want a good majority there to agree with any change.
I mean, we can maybe go 2/3. That might be at least lowered a little bit. So I mean, that's usually what it would be at town meeting anyway, right?
Yeah,
So,
I'm not looking to make this difficult for anybody to get some changes made to the neighborhood, but I want to make sure that, like you said, when we do something, it doesn't have a ripple effect, and we have people coming to a meeting right after it saying, "Why'd you guys do this?"
right. So just because, I mean, keep in mind, a lot of this was similar to my policy in Concord. A lot of it is, and what we found is it helps to also weed out just the people that want to come in and just have a quick question. You know what I mean? And
Right.
get something done. I mean, there's a little bit of a process. So if it's a real issue, you're going to spend the time to do that. If it's, some of these low hanging fruit pieces that people don't necessarily, might not necessarily agree with in your neighborhood. So that's kind of how we looked at it when we developed it. I could say the 70% might be a little high, but I mean, if we knock it down to 2/3, I mean, that seems to be, I think, a reasonable approach.
Yeah, reasonable and accomplishing what we want is to make sure that we're doing the right thing by everybody, because we don't have to live there. That's the thing. You know what I mean? We want to make sure we're doing the right thing, and it's best for the town, right? One more chat that I had here: was there any way to see previously reported claims? I think my concern may have already been brought up, since there's a speed trap at the end of my driveway. The concern of mine, she doesn't want to duplicate work with repetitive reporting. I would say that as of now, the way to do it would be to go through our meeting minutes and our agenda, which is publicly posted on the town's website. But feel free to call me. I don't think there's really any harm in duplicating a concern or report, because sometimes we're waiting for more feedback from residents, or she may have a different perspective than the first two complaints that I got. So I would say, go through our meeting minutes, go through our agenda. You can watch our Zoom calls, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with sending off another email, even if it was already reported to us. Might provide some insight into your unique perspective of whatever the complaint is. So I think she's looking for like a tracking, like a click fix type deal. Like I just don't think that we have that.
So the software that we use for the permitting piece is something that we could potentially use. So maybe we take it a little offline, Joe, and talk about that and
Sure.
see what the approach is, because I can show you what we use today. I mean, if we're sharing that between you, myself, and even Matt, so we can track kind of where we are with different things. Because what I find is the big piece for me is when it leaves the TAC to go into, public works folks to get out into, actually be constructed or installed or whatever it may be.
Right.
That would be a big piece to make sure that we can kind of follow up and make sure stuff has happened.
Yep.
I've been receiving a few emails, obviously, from the folks up on Montrose from what we did there.
Mhm.
Just to kind of keep everybody on the same page and different pieces on, because there's a lot of moving parts with all of these things.
Sure.
That's just to make sure that it's a lot easier for us to maintain it. I mean, if we're, as things are happening, you get an email update to the two of us, so we know that stuff has happened. It would make things a lot easier for us. So
I know Bill has an online form for anybody that has accessibility problems in Wakefield, but just go online.
yeah, so it's kind of the same idea, and it just helps to track to make sure things don't get lost. That's that.
All right. Does anybody else have anything before we adjourn the meeting? Motion to adjourn at 10:53.